It is Friday, the 16th of October, 2020, and we're looking at an old website that I had up on the internet basically between the late 1990s, I think 1998, and the fall of 2006, when all of my homestead websites went down. This one is about the ancient Egyptian scarab beetle god Khepri, also known as Khepera. And it has some GIF animations in it. It has two GIF animations. We're seeing this one at the top, which is comparing image of Khepri in the solar bark of the sun god, hovering above it essentially, with a photo of a partial phase of a solar eclipse and a astronomical drawing, a fairly simple astronomical drawing of a total solar eclipse. And we can see how the boat of the sun god is quite similar to a partial solar eclipse, and we can see how Khepri, as depicted in this particular image, looks a lot like a drawing of a total solar eclipse. So let's just read what I wrote, and we can take things from there. So, some years ago, as a direct result of my ongoing extensive research into the profound influence of eclipses, especially total solar eclipses, on ancient humanity's religious beliefs and, in quotation marks, mythology, it occurred to me that the Egyptian scarab beetle god Khepri was almost certainly inspired by ancient Egyptian observations of total solar eclipses. Upon seeing the image of Khepri from an Egyptian Book of the Dead that I used in these animations, my intuitive hunch was considerably reinforced. The Egyptian scarab beetle god Khepri, as it is depicted in this image with the ray-like wings, distinctly resembles scientific drawings of total solar eclipses made by 19th century astronomers. Further research into the behavior of scarab beetles, also known as dung beetles, and English translations of ancient Egyptian religious texts such as the pyramid text, the coffin text, and the Egyptian Book of the Dead, which the Egyptians actually called Coming Forth by Day, has convinced me that the scarab beetle god Khepri was in fact inspired by total solar eclipse phenomena, and that Khepri represents the black sun that is formed by the new moon as it is seen during the total phase of a total solar eclipse, i.e. totality, or I should say also known as totality. So we're just going to scroll down here. When the darkened new moon seems to be endowed with the radiant white wings of the sun's corona. It has recently come to my attention that the Egyptian astronomer Ayman Mohammed Ibrahim, who has also extensively researched how total solar eclipses of the sun profoundly influenced ancient Egyptian religious beliefs, as is evidence from their various creation myths and their religious iconography, has come to the very same conclusion about the scarab god Khepri entirely independently of me, to the best of my knowledge in any case. The above animation clearly illustrates how the boat of the sun that is associated with Khepri and various other Egyptian sun gods such as Ra and the Egyptian phoenix known as the Bennu bird was inspired by the thin golden crescent of the partially eclipsed sun, which corresponds both in shape and in gold color to the ancient Egyptian papyrus reed boats. The 19th century black and white scientific astronomical drawing of a total solar eclipse is virtually identical to this ancient Egyptian depiction of the scarab god Khepri. I intend to provide more details in the very near future, since I have a slightly different take on this scarab beetle as total solar eclipse god thesis than Ayman Mohammed Ibrahim, one that provides some additional reasons as to why the Egyptians associated the scarab god with total solar eclipse phenomena. But for now, I will suggest reading this interesting web page about how total solar eclipse phenomena inspired the ancient Egyptian scarab beetle god known as Khepri or Khepera. So that's referring to Ayman Mohammed Ibrahim's webpage. I'm not sure if it still exists. I'm not going to follow that link right now because I don't want to mess things up. But I will check into that later. So here's the animation comparing the image of Khepri to a particular fairly simple drawing of a total solar eclipse. The drawing is essentially an illustration from a book on total solar eclipses, I believe from the 19th century, possibly early mid 20th century, but we can see how the way the eclipse is drawn is pretty much identical to this image of Khepri. And as I said, there's other evidence regarding Khepri's behavior. And okay, here's a photograph of an eclipse of the sun. So this GIF compares the image from the Book of the Dead of Khepri to this astronomical drawing, but also to an actual photograph of total solar eclipse, which is, you can see, similar. And then on either side of that, we have the jewelry depicting Khepri. I believe this is jewelry from the tomb of Tutankhamun. And yes, that's my budgie chirping away in the background. So I think we'll more or less wrap it up. I'll just scroll down here and see if there's anything else. No, this is like just extraneous information that was on this Internet Archive preserved website. I will just quickly say that in terms of the additional information, which I don't believe Ayman Mohammed Ibrahim ever spoke about, in terms of the behavior of scarab beetles and how it can be seen as a microcosmic reflection of a total solar eclipse. Scarab beetles push a dung ball along the ground. This dung ball has larvae in it, basically ready to grow and eventually hatch. So these scarab beetles, specifically the dung beetles, which were associated with the sun, which were basically deified by ancient Egyptians, it's well known that the part of the mythology, the established, accepted part of the mythology is that the beetle is pushing the sun along on the ground, is corresponding to the sun being pushed through the sky by this imaginary scarab beetle god up there. So it's sort of as above, so below. But what is not generally known, and which I believe the Egyptians pretty well certainly saw and perceived, and which contributed to them developing their beliefs about Khepri, the dung ball is buried in a hole. Well, the totally eclipsed sun can be perceived as a hole in the sky. It's been described as a hole in the sky by even, I think, professional astronomers, but certainly ordinary total solar eclipse observers have described the totally eclipsed sun, the black disk of the moon really in front of the sun, as a hole in the sky, and it does look like a hole in the sky. So I do believe that the Egyptians made this connection too, and that in addition to the total solar eclipse resembling somewhat a scarab beetle itself, a top view of a black scarab beetle, that it's sort of like layered symbolism, and it is my hypothesis, if you want to use that term, that the burying of the dung ball representing the sun in this hole by the dung beetle, that this, in the minds of the ancient Egyptians who came up with the concept of Khepri as a god, this was the total solar eclipse. This is basically the hole in the sky above and the hole in the ground below corresponding to it. And then later, I presume some weeks or months later, the larvae hatched as beetles and came out of this hole where the dung ball was buried. And so this, I believe, the Egyptians saw the correspondence to the rebirth of the sun after the eclipse. So you have the beetle burying the sun in the ground in a hole, corresponding to the hole in the sky of the total solar eclipse, not to mention the fact that the total solar eclipse also can be perceived as a gigantic scarab beetle up there in the sky. And then the subsequent emergence of the young scarab beetles from where the solar dung ball was buried in the ground, that this is the rebirth of the corresponds to the rebirth of the sun, the re-emergence of the sun behind from behind the moon, which is totally eclipsing it. So that's my take on the Khepri myth. I do believe that it's highly probable, almost certain, that the ancient Egyptians did make this as above, so below correspondence in developing their mythology, their religious beliefs about Khepri, the scarab beetle god. On that note, I think we'll try to wrap this up and keep it reasonably short.